Okay, well, my screen is pretty full and it's 3 minutes after the hour, so I think it's always good to start pretty promptly. So I'm just going to welcome everybody. My name is Ramloti and I live here at the Hiraman Universal Ashram. And I'm really grateful that we have all of you, and particularly Hiraman, who lives in Washington, United States, and has quite a story. And also Nan Singh, who lives in Australia, who has quite a story. And I have a hard time sleeping the night before these because I look forward to hearing all of it and to seeing who's here. So the format will probably be, and I'm sitting here in the temple, and I'm sitting in the shrine area of the Divine Mother Hariakanteshwari, which we're so grateful to have. And next to it is our Murti of Hariakant Babaji. And I'm sitting particularly here because Hiraman has a great special affinity and story around that. So I thought it would be nice to sit right here. So that places me, and it's nice to have all of you. The format will be, I think we'll begin. I'm going to spotlight Hiraman and Nan Singh so that it'll be on them. And I'll ask everybody to mute while they are speaking so that you don't forget and start chopping apples or something like that. So we'll ask you all to mute. And then once they introduce themselves a little bit, then anybody that would like to ask a question. So this is your time to ask, well, tell me what it was like in 1976 with Babaji, whatever you want, or how is it, what have you learned and how are you applying it to your life today? Whatever questions you might have. So you can unmute at that time and ask those questions, and then yes, we'll do that. So I'm going to do my best technology skill, I hope, and see if I can, oh, here we go. And I'm going to go up here, spotlight for everyone. Wait, I have to put in a spotlight somebody else though too. Spotlight, Nan Singh. This is all, there we go. This is all new technology for me, is probably for many of you. So can everybody see Hiraman's to my right? He's got longer hair than Nan Singh.
Yeah, he's got more
messier hair too.
You to decide who wants to share a little bit about who you are and what you're up to.
Go ahead, Nan Singh.
No, well, I was waiting for you here, Aman. You go.
Well, my name's Hiraman, and I live in Washington State, and I met Babaji physically in 1976, and in 1978 he sent me to Hawaii to build a temple, and I got to meet Nan Singh there. I think you visited us. I can't remember what year it was, but
85.
85. Okay, great. Well, it was lovely. The volcano was going off then too. Yeah, I remember that. And any questions, I just be happy to answer.
Great. Let's hear from Nan Singh a little bit, where you live and when you met Babaji. If you want to share anything more?
I first was living in India in 1975 and looking for my guru, and well, I took a one-way ticket and $100. That's all I had. And the first time I got out of the plane in Delhi, in the old airport, it was the first time in my life everything seemed normal. From the minute I hit the streets, it just seemed normal life. And but I got called back to England. That's where I came from. Baba sent me to Australia. And then I went again in 1977, and I had the darshan of some great saints, including Anandamayi Ma. and I was living in Almora, and she came to Almora, and I was sitting in the courtyard in front of her with maybe 100 people. And inside I was asking her to take away my doubts. You know, it's hard. I didn't have any money. I had maybe $5 left at that time, no ticket.
Yes, nuns.
And my whole body became empty as I sat in front of her, and it filled with light. And her voice spoke inside me, and I looked up. She was looking completely at me, total focus. And her voice said, "First, you have to love me." So that was a pretty strong experience. And 48 hours later, I walked to Hiraman. And when I first arrived, Baba said, I'd been looking everywhere. And I didn't realize that it wasn't me looking, it was him calling. And I was a bit slow on the uptake. And when I got to Hiraman, I made pranam to Baba, and he said, "You stay here tonight, tomorrow you go, you sleep on the floor." And my heart broke, and I thought immediately, well, I might as well just go and jump off a cliff or something, because that's the end. And which wasn't rational. And as soon as I had that thought, he said, "No, you good man, you stay. Mundan karo, jap karo, kamyog karo, you stay." And later I asked him, "How long should I stay, Baba?" And he said, "Always."
Oh, that's beautiful.
So he's been really the major focus of my life for the last 43 years.
That's the first time I've heard that story. That's really lovely.
Oh, I got heaps. Like you.
Thank you for sharing that.
So somebody has a question that would like to begin with a question?
I don't have a question, but I just want to hear more, more stories.
Must be your turn, Hiraman.
Well, maybe I would like to see everybody, and I think I'm only seeing like 6 people. Is there a way to so I can kind of
Go and put gallery view. I've got gallery view on, and I have Avanish is there now, and Starry and Hiranya. And
okay, gallery view. All right.
But
Well, we don't know where that is. Well, I guess we won't have gallery view right now, maybe.
yeah, so just 1, 2, 3.
Okay. I can just rotate around. I think I can move everybody every now and then, just see different people. Okay. Well, I had a kind of similar type stories as Nan Singh. I guess I could, it's inspired me to tell that. A little bit different. Babaji in his older body always appeared to me when I was a child, since I was about 4 years old, and kind of was my guardian angel and kept me from jumping off cliffs, I guess. And then in 1976, he appeared in my orchard while I was mulching a pear tree. And he just said, "Come." And before he disappeared, he switched forms into his present form, and then back to his old form, and back to his present form, and back to his old form, and back to his present form, and then disappeared. And so it was, quite powerful. He didn't tell me where to come, but that night I went into the house, and I just happened to pick a magazine up that was there that mentioned that the Kumbh Mela was happening in India that year. And so I decided that I'd go there. And so the next day I mortgaged my B truck to get a little extra money, and I bought 2 tickets. I was living with him woman named Karen at the time, and we liked to climb mountains then. And so I sweetened the pot with a trip to the Himalayas for her up into the base camp of Everest. And then we went to India, and it was like Nan Singh. It was, when I got off the plane, it was in the middle of the night, and I couldn't sleep. And I just felt like intoxicated, like I'd finally, and I'd traveled quite a bit around the world before then. But there was nothing like it. India just, felt like home. And so I just kind of walked around this. We went and stayed in a place, and I just couldn't sleep. So I just kind of walked around and watched India wake up, and the street sweepers came out, and it was really beautiful. And then the next day we found out, I didn't even know where the Mela was or anything. I just got 2 tickets and left. So we found out that the Mela wasn't in Allahabad, but there was no trains or buses. Everybody was going there, so there was no trains or buses. So we went to Varanasi first, and then came back to Allahabad. And in Varanasi, I was pretty young then, and had ideas about what it was to be a yogi and all these things that I thought were the right things to do. And so I decided that I wouldn't eat or drink water and only take a bedroll until I met my teacher. It was kind of like the kosher form of blackmail, I guess, is what I thought of it as. So that's what I did. And we got on a train, and I'd been in a lot of places in the world, but I'd never been any place like India, where at that time the trains were just, there were people on the roof and out the windows and out the back. It was just, India's not like that anymore, but it was pretty amazing then. It was kind of a big view for a country boy from Washington. And so we got to the Mela, and it was at night, and it was on the Sangam, which is a big confluence of 3 rivers, one underground river in the Brihaspati, and the Ganga and the Yamuna make this big giant sandbar. And it was covered with campfires. It was really amazingly beautiful sight. And we got off the train and walked to the place and just crawled under a tent for the night, and the next day I started looking all over for Babaji. I didn't know he was Babaji. I had no idea that who this person was. And I had read Autobiography of Yogi years before, but I'd never really thought that it was possible to meet Babaji. So I just started walking around, and day after day, and looking, and met all these really beautiful people, but there was no real connection. And after a few days, we found this the Hare Krishna site, and so Karen stayed there. And the Mela had these big balloons, helium balloons with different designs on them, because it was just totally flat, so you couldn't really, there was, when I first got there was 13 million people there, and so you really couldn't remember which way to go without these kind of directions. And they had different geometric patterns and colors on them. So every day I would leave Karen there, and I would go around and look and have these amazing conversations. I met Sai Baba, and I met Muktananda, and I met Prabhupada, and would have these weird things where they just all of a sudden have private interviews, and I would get to talk to them. But I didn't have any spark with any of them. There was no real draw. And I had met one older man that was a really sweet human being, and he had a large following, but he wasn't. And his following, especially sometimes it can be popular for to have Western disciples or devotees. And so his followers were really pushing me to be involved there, but he wasn't that way at all. And he was really, really gentle and kind. And I didn't speak any Hindi then, and he didn't speak English. So, but he, through his translator, he just kept telling me, you'll find who you're looking for. Don't give up. And so after about 5 days, I came back to the Hare Krishna tent, and Karen was with a foreign person, Ferengi, I guess. And she said, this man's just been with Babaji. And I was just like, I knew, like after reading Yogananda's book, you know, when somebody says Babaji, you can't help but think of Babaji. But also Babaji is a really common term in India. So, so I just said, well, which Babaji? And I was like really skeptical. And he said, well, the Babaji from Yogananda's book. And I said, well, I didn't mean to be rude. I'm not really a rude person, but I just was so skeptical that I kind of was a little bit. And he didn't really think I was being rude, but afterwards I thought I was. But before he left, he said, well, he's going to be here tomorrow. And so that night I just laid in the tent and just, I don't think I slept all night long. And the next morning I really looked around all over again and again and again. And there was just something like that same thing that happened with Nan Singh. There was just a moment of surrender when I just realized that here were all these teachers, and I wasn't finding who I was looking for. And so I came back at just before sunset and came back to the tent, and I just said to Karen, well, I guess I'm not ready. I think, I guess, and she really wanted to go. It was pretty intense. And so I said, I guess we could go now. And she just had this really moment of compassion. And she just looked at me and said, we don't have to go right now. And so then my hope came back up again a little bit. And I said, well, let's go. We'll go, and I'll introduce you to this really lovely man that I've met. And so we went to his tent, and he was there. He was there all the time. Anytime I ever went by there, I never saw him not being there. And just before, as we walked in the front of the tent, they were these big army tents that were like maybe 100 feet long or something like that. And just as we walked in the front, he just scooted out the back and was gone. And it was like, I think it was his really sweet way of not letting me maybe get attached to him and stay there, because at that point I was really empty, but also just, I'd felt like my whole life's meaning was like, where am I? What am I doing? And so we left, and I thought, okay, well, we can go now. And we started to walk till the train station. And by this time there was 19 or 20 million people there. And so like Karen just had to hold on to the back of my shirt, and you just had to kind of cross these rivers of people. And, you could be kind of taken half a mile downstream by the time you got across these big moving bands of people. It was really an amazing experience. And right in the middle, all of a sudden, this group parts, and it was really weird. Like it was cloudy that day, and then the clouds kind of had a little part that came out, and this ray of sunshine came down right into this clearing. And at the other end of the clearing is Gusmus, this man that Karen had met. And he just ran up to me, and I just went, and he said, I knew I would find you. And he said, Babaji came to me in a dream and said that I couldn't come back unless I brought you with me. And and so I just still, I had a skeptical nature a little bit, but I was like, nobody could be skeptical with this. It was just, so I said, okay, well, I still didn't know if it was Babaji or who it was, but I thought, okay, I want to go here. So we went to bathe, and then we went back and dropped our bedrolls off where he was staying in this actual city. And and Babaji was going to be at another devotees compound, which was also in Allahabad. And so we went there, and Kusmus and Srivastava were having a discussion. We were standing on a porch, and Babaji wasn't there. He hadn't arrived. And so they're talking, and Srivastava, the man that owned the house, was a little upset because Kusmus wasn't staying there, and Babaji had told him to take care of him. So they were having a little bit of an argument. And then he just happened to flick the shutters of the like little wooden louvered shutters on this window open, and one of them was standing on each side of me, and I was facing the window. And as he opened the shutters, this beam of light just came out and right into my chest. And I looked and it just was like my heart was completely open. And I looked in there, and here's this person and he was wearing the same vest, this kind of hideous variegated colored wool vest that somebody had knit for him. And I just said, "Who is that?" Because I didn't still correspond them to being Babaji. I just knew that this person was my person. And then they both looked at me like I was kind of slow and said, "Well, that's Babaji, of course. We've been talking about him for the last half hour." And so I didn't say anything. I just said, "Well, I'm going to stay here." And Gusmus and Karen went back to stay where all of our bedding was. And I just kind of huddled up on the porch, and it was really cold at night. So it was just freezing cold, but I wasn't going anywhere. And then halfway through the evening, somebody came over and gave me a little wool dari, which is a little rug. It's about 2.5, 3 feet wide, maybe. So I just huddled up in a ball and rolled myself in that and made it through till morning. And in the morning, we all sat together everybody was having tea, and I was still fasting. So I just had said, "No, thanks, I'm not hungry or thirsty," and which doesn't work very well in India. So pretty much they had this, I didn't really want to talk about fasting, but pretty soon I just had to say, "Well, I'm not eating until I meet Babaji." And then this really lovely doctor from Bombay next to me just said, "Well, haven't you already met him?" And then it just like, I'd still had this idea that I was a yogi and, that I had to go and do these certain things. And in that moment, it just all went away. And I just realized that I had met him. And I reached down to grab a glass of water. And as soon as I touched it to my lips, Babaji walked in through the big gate. And it was like this, just everything was so synchronistic. You can't, it's hard to even explain it. But he walked through the big gate, and people just gathered around him, and I kind of stood in the background, and he just walked right up to me, and when he told me in the orchard before he left, "You come," was how he said it. And then he came up to me and said, "You come." And so then we spent time there, and we went at the Mela together, and just been the same ever since.
Thank you, Hiraman.
Baba ki jai.
Yes.
Which year this was roughly in Allahabad?
In 1976, the end of 1976
Oh.
was the Mela. Yeah. And yeah. Then we spent a lovely 3 or 4 days at the Mela, and the bathing night. I mean, there's just all kinds of stories. I could just take all this time up, but Nan Singh's probably got a lot of nice things to say.
A few. That's beautiful, Hiraman. I never heard this story. Thank you.
It's beautiful.
So yeah, and the people in the group can either ask to hear another story, or if there's something more specific to ask to. you can hear.
Don't be shy.
Yeah, maybe how, yeah, about Nan Singh, when you got to the ashram, a little bit more about that. After you said you were a good man and sent you to get your head shaved and to do karma yoga.
Yeah, I was, there's a echo, somebody's got their microphone on. I was reflecting, knowing about this satsang today, what would be useful and valid for everybody to share about from my experiences. And I need to start really a little bit at the beginning. I grew up in a very, very wealthy family, and with great privilege. I went to the same school as some of the royal family in England. When I was 12, my brother died, and my mother had a nervous breakdown. My father became completely emotionally distant, and I was sent to what in England is called a public school. It's a private boarding school where I was abused and bullied. So in the middle of all this deep-seated family grief over the loss of my little brother, you know, I was kind of sent to hell. So I ran away, smart thing to do. And I got sent back. So then when I was 19 or 20, the family lost all their money, everything, houses, cars, everything, nothing. And I lived on the streets in London. And I felt like I'd been completely abandoned, and everything that I'd been brought up to believe was the truth had been out from under me. And slowly I started to meet people who'd been living in India, and something inside just clicked. And I knew that's where I was supposed to be. The reason I tell that story is that only that in the spiritual life, there's often suffering. And maybe that's the trigger that draws us to looking for the divine inside and outside. And even after living with Baba in the 70s, you know, I still suffer fear and anger and lust and all the other undesirable emotions. They don't go away, but it gets easier. So in those days, there weren't many Westerners in Hiraman, maybe 8 or 10, and not many Indians either. And there was no electricity in Hiraman. There were no water pipes. The water was all taken from the river. And in the evenings, we would sit and sing the kirtan, and then Baba would come and sit on his asan, and it was just in candlelight. It was very sweet, very sweet. And one night I was sitting close to Baba, and I looked up, and he was looking at me, like really looking. And when he really looked, you knew, full energy. And in that moment, I was like, wow, he can see what I'm thinking. And as I had that thought, he kind of just, you know, gentle nod. And I was like, whoa, that's something. And then I went, oh no, if he can see that, then he can, oh no, and that, oh, and that. And I was so ashamed, I started crying. I just tears pouring down my face of shame for all the negativity and that was inside. And I looked up at him again, and he was just beaming love, just utter love. And quicker than I can tell the story, the realization came deep inside that this is the miracle of the divine. that whatever you perceive, whatever we perceive the divine to be, we are transparent to the divine, and we all have negativity. It's part of the human experience. But beyond that, we are all utterly loved. Every being is utterly loved. In our essence, who we really are is love, and we are loved, all of us. The journey since in the last 40 odd years, I've had great successes in business and great failures. I've been so broke. I lived with my then wife and children in a tent in the forest. We had nothing, no money. So this life goes up and down. But this realization of love never goes. And even though we suffer these vicissitudes in life, there comes with daily practice the ability to be the observer of them, not to be caught in all these things, not to be caught in the passions of happiness, not to be caught in the depths of despair, but to be able to see them and to acknowledge it, not to run away from it, that'll make it worse, but to sit and see it. Oh, here is despair. Here is despair now. And the beauty of that, when you're not so caught in it, it tends to pass more quickly. The other story I thought this morning, just as Hiraman was talking, even though my focus was very much on you, brother, this just thought arose spontaneously about faith and the importance of faith. And in 1 year in the monsoon, you know, in Hirakan, the river valley is maybe half a kilometre wide. And normally the river's, you know, mountain river, but relatively gentle. But in the monsoon, it is a screaming torrent. And in 1977, 2 devotees died just by stepping off the steps that lead from the ashram to the river and to put their feet in the water to have a bath, and boom, they were gone. And in that year, the water doesn't cover the whole riverbed for half a kilometre. There are sort of higher bits, and driftwood gets washed up onto the bits where the water isn't. And, you know, we used to use this driftwood for cooking. Now, Baba had said no one is to go near the river. It's too dangerous. And then one day he called 3 of us, an Indian, Tikku Singh, and Gurak Singh and myself. And he said, bring a length of rope. And we had to go and meet him by the river. And he showed us how to tie ourselves to each other with this rope. And then he said, go across the river and bring these logs. And we're like, Baba, people died in this river. But okay, we're roped together. We have to get across. The water is up to our chests, and it's boulders, like, you know, really huge boulders rolling down the river. And there's all the boulders under your feet as you try and cross the river are moving in the flow of the water. This is deadly. If you went on your own, for sure, you're gone. So he stood with Shastraji and right there and watched us the whole time. And one of us would slip and the other ones would desperately hold on, and then we'd make it across, and we tied ropes around the logs and make them back. But we did all this without questioning. There's no question. And afterwards I was thinking, what the hell was that about? You know, there's plenty of logs in the forest we could have got without that. And I thought, it's about faith. It's about if the divine, which is your intuitive also inside you, if it leads you to do something, no matter what it is, take faith and all will be well. It's this, and does that last all the time in life? No, it drifts in and out. Your faith drifts in and out, but keep faith, keep holding on. On the puja place here in my house, then I keep a pair of padukas, they're sacred sandals. And last year, I don't know if you know, 110,000 square kilometers of Australia burnt in bushfires. It's estimated more than 3 billion animals died. The big cities of the East Coast were covered in smoke. We were all wearing masks before COVID for months. And there was a fire burning on an 80-kilometer front, and I could stand on my front lawn and watch it in the hills come closer and closer and closer. The car was packed with clothes and, important papers for more than a month. And I thought, for sure, this is gonna happen. And, but I would go every day to the puja, and I would kneel down and put my arms behind the padukas. And well, there's nothing I can do except hold on to Baba's feet, and he'll take care. And for sure, I had fear and trauma, but I just held on every day. And I heard his voice one day, and he called me Nanwa. He said, Nanwa, you have to go through the fire. And I went, okay, well, we're going to get burnt here. The fire came to the edge of our suburb, and the rain started. Oof. After months, the fire was gone. So the thing I think that causes most of our despair and angst is the feeling that we're separate, and we're not. They say if you're a devotee, then he's everywhere for you, and there's no separation. We're all totally, utterly connected. There's nowhere to go. We're all utterly loved. And faith and worship is vital. It keeps the spark of love strong inside. Bole Baba Ki Jai.
Jai.
Bole Baba Ki Jai. Wow, thank you. Welcome to other people that just got on, and you're welcome to unmute and ask a specific question of either Hiraman or Nan Singh that might be relevant in your mind or heart.
Oh, one other thing. The older I get, the more time goes on, the more I realize I actually don't know anything.
Could I hear the story about the Babaji's Murti? That's in Redstone, that
Sure.
belonged to you, that was in Hawaii before?
I think I belong to it, it didn't belong to me. I think that's still the case. Yeah. Well, Babaji had sent me to build a temple on the Big Island in Hawaii. And we're in Vrindavan in Rajasthan, where the murtis are made, actually in Jaipur, but we were in Vrindavan. And it was a really lovely Guru Purnima. And Babaji would just sit all day, and thousands of people would come, and they would come and just draw from him, inexhaustibly. And then in the evening, after Arti, he would just get up and he'd have, like, during the day, they'd bring malas and he'd just be covered with malas, hundreds of them. And then every so often he'd just take them all off and put them around my shoulders, you know. And so I probably 1,000, maybe 1,000 malas he gave me. And a lot of these malas now, Ramalodi is kind of distributed from Crestone, and I've given them to people as they go along. But so this went on for the 3 days of Purnima, and then one night, and then also in the evening we'd have Mahaprasad, which is just a Man Singh would cook a small meal for Babaji, but it would be always enough for a few more of us to eat too. So we'd get to eat with Babaji. And then that one evening, Babaji said, the Murti will be here tomorrow. And I don't even remember what year that was, maybe 79 or something like that. And so the next day the Murti came, and Babaji sent me out to get a case to carry it in. And so we became inseparable, and we still are. Another really beautiful thing about that time in Vrindavan was I was leaving from there to go back to America, and not going back to Hiraman. And so we were all saying our goodbyes, and Babaji just, you know, when you left, you just didn't want to leave, you know, so you knew that you had things to do and that he wanted you to do things, but it was really hard to tear yourself away from him. And so he just got in a car and left, and I was just standing there, you know. So then I said, okay, now I got to go. And I had the Murti, and I got in a rickshaw to go to the train station. And we're winding through these streets, and on the way to the train station. And then we come around a corner, and Dr. Rao was driving, and Muniraj and Babaji and Shastriji were in the car. And and Babaji's standing out kind of by the hood and next to Shastriji and Muniraj. And then we come around the corner, and then, so it's like I got to say goodbye to him in this really sweet way. And then, so after a few minutes, he just, you know, had me take the Murti out one more time, and I just said goodbye to Babaji, and he got in the car and left. So it was like Babaji was like that. He made all of us feel, and still can with all of you. You know, don't think because we were there back longer time ago that makes any difference, because Babaji can be with all of us at any time, and all of us differently. Like, you felt like sometimes you were the only person in the world when you were with Babaji, and there was just, you know, he knew, like Nan Singh was saying about him knowing your thoughts. That happened to me hundreds of times. Babaji, for some reason, wouldn't make me sometimes be the translator, even though my Hindi is pretty terrible. So, but it was really informative to stand next to him and just over and over again hear what people asked for, and what people wanted, and what was important to people. And sometimes I would formulate a question, and I'd be putting it into Hindi, you know, like taking time to say it right. And just before I was ready to speak it, he'd just turn and give me the answer. That happened 100 times probably. So, I mean, the Murti is an embodiment of Babaji, and was with us, and a great blessing. And also the biggest blessing is that we be with Babaji. He's always with us. We just get to choose if we want to be with him, or if we want to be with the mom. It's our choice. You know, we get tired or sleepy and lose contact, but the contact's always there. It's only when we lose contact that we notice that we're not in contact. Babaji's always with us. He's with every one of you. If you're here and interested in these stories, then Babaji's with you. Just talk to him. don't hold back.
Hiraman, can you tell me, I asked you about this very old Rudraksha mala that when you brought, so we're fortunate to have this beautiful Murti for the last 6 years here at the ashram, caretaking it until Hiraman and Hiranya have a more permanent situation in Washington. But, and somebody said, as they were talking, oh, this is an old mala, should we get a new one? I said, no,
No, don't.
something very special about that it came. So could you just tell quickly that story?
Yeah, that was a mala that I wore in Ericon a long time. And that at that time when when Babaji stopped the car, he took the mala off. And when we opened the case that the Murti was in, he took the mala off my neck and put it on the Murti and said, just leave this mala here. And it's kind of a ratty looking old mala, but it's supposed to be there. Thank you for not taking it off. I guess I never told you that.
I feel so grateful every time we bathe him and put the more that on him. So I'll
Yeah.
take a picture of the Divine Mother too. Thank you, Hiraman.
Yeah, thank you. It's nice to, I don't really tell stories a lot, and it's kind of fun to do it. So thanks for all being here.
Hiraman, this is a little bit of an aside, but I just moved to Hawaii. Is there, did everybody, any groups or people here anymore?
No, it's now an Eastern Orthodox Catholic family church thing. In 1990, my mom got sick with cancer. So Hiranya and I left and came back to Bellingham. I think it was a 2-year process, but she got better and then we had to go back. And during that time, everything kind of fell apart in Hawaii. And so we went back after my daughter was born and kind of tried to start up again, but it just became a little untenable. They're drug dealers that ran their generator all night, moved next door, and it just was time. It's still a kind of a sadness in my heart that I didn't do a better job there. But so it's time to build a new temple here coming up, I think.
What year was the temples?
I started clearing the land, I think, in 1977, and it went in that we tried again till about 1993, I think. So it was going for a while. It was really beautiful. When a community really works, it's just beyond description how wonderful it is.
Mm. And did Baba suggest that you start the ashram, or you just felt it in your heart?
No, he was pretty specific. We had Harak Singh and I lived in a room together, and there was a map on the wall, a big square world map, and in the middle of it was the Hawaiian Islands. For some reason, I don't think I've ever seen a map where they were right in the middle. But Babaji just walked into my room one day and just said, and he just was looking at me, just square in the eyes, and it was just like one of those moments where time just stops, and he just pointed his finger at the wall and said, "You go Hawaii, build temple." Just totally out of the blue. I thought I was living in India for the rest of my life, but you know how that goes. And so he just sent me there, and I went and found and I didn't have any money or anything, like I decided I was going to be a yogi, and I'd given all my money away in India, and so I went back, and that's a whole other story. But anyway, things just happened really fast. And then the very first day I was back in Washington, in the town where I lived, I stayed with some friends, and the next morning we were out on their lawn having some breakfast, and somebody that I'd grown up with had become a contractor, just drove by and saw me and stopped and said, "Hey, I just bid a really outrageous amount to do this job, and because I didn't want them to accept it." And he said, "Do you want to do it? Because I don't want to do it." And so I had enough money to buy the land in about 3 weeks after being back you know, so. And Babaji bought me a ticket to fly back, and it was all just, you know, they're just everything, you know, if we just kind of keep trying, work hard, have faith, hope, prayer, then in my estimation, things always work out. And sometimes there's pain in the process, but that's not such a big deal. We're able to handle pains and sorrows and that, you know, just as easy as we are joy and pleasure, you know, it's all part of life.
Mm.
Thank you.
And we can have a lot of fun doing it.
Nan Singh, can you share a little bit about your marriage to Buri? I mean, did Bob read that? I didn't ever knew that. I was sort of surprised, and you don't have to, it doesn't feel appropriate.
Oh, well, it leads into a couple of things. Okay, Baba sent me to live on my own in Rajasthan, in the desert, near a desert village, and then I went even deeper into the desert, and I got very ill with malaria, and in fact, I actually went blind. I woke up one morning after a malarial fever, and I knew it was morning because I could feel the heat of the sun, and I put my hand here and I couldn't see anything. I was completely blind. And my energy was going lower and lower and lower, and I couldn't get off the bed. It was 6 miles to the nearest road. And I went, well, this is it. You know, I don't think I'm going to get better from here. And inside I said to Baba, you know, Baba, look, if this is it, let's go. I'm ready to leave. And inside I said goodbye to my family and a few friends. And then I said, okay, Baba, let's go. And of course, the next day I started to get better enough to walk out to the nearest road. So it was a kind of spiritual death. And for a while I wondered, you know, I was a bit hurt that he'd send me away and send me to live on my own. I wasn't allowed to take anything with me. A lota, a container for water, and malas, and the clothes I stood up in, and he gave me his longotis, 2 longotis, little loincloths you wear instead of underwear, or as underwear, and a mat to sleep on, and a shawl to cover me. That's it. That's all I was allowed to take, and a notebook and a pencil. First I was pretty bored, and then after a while I thought, well, I better sit in the corner and do some japa. So I'm sitting there with my mala, and then after a while I started to do with another mala in the other hand so I could count how many rounds I'd done. And after a week I found I was sitting there maybe 12 hours a day. And at the end of the day, I'd write down how many rounds I did, and eventually I'd done Om Namah Shivaya more than 1 million times. And years later, I read that this is a tapasya that you do. And he tricked me into doing it. There's no way I was going to sit and do that anywhere else. So he tricked me out of boredom into doing that. And I got so sick. Again, I had to go back to England for treatment. And there I met Buri, who became my wife. And I said, well, you know, like if we're going to be together, you better come to India and meet Baba, because if that's not for you, then we're not going to be together. So we went to Baba and lived with him in 79. And then she came from Australia. So I didn't have any money. I ended up in Australia. I think I had $400 when I arrived here. So I had this history of traveling without money and one-way tickets. And after we'd been here a few months, less than a year, we had twins. So no money, twins, instant family, man, you're not going anywhere. So when the twins were born, I took photos of them the morning they were born and sent them straight to Baba and said, Babaji, would you please name these children? Because that's the tradition in India, the guru names the children. Well, a week or so after I sent the letter to India, I got a letter from my father, who was a sort of grumpy old Englishman, saying, well, now you're a parent, you're going to find out that life is grim and earnest and serious, and your Indian philosophies will come to nothing. Oh, and by the way, if you give them Indian names, I'll never speak to you again. And I'm like, shit. Whoops. A few weeks later, the photos came back from Baba. And on the back of the photo, one photo of each twin, was written Herbert and Martin. And they're the only children he ever gave English names to. It's like he sees all. A little thing about japa. I don't know whether you know, but Baba's first Western devotee was an elderly lady from Boston called Tara Devi, and she'd lived with her husband in India since 1953. He was he directed Swiss Aid in India. And I met her before I met Baba. She was the first one talking to me about Baba. And she told me this story one day, and she would speak to Baba like no one else could. She treated him often like a naughty boy, you know. And she was in Baba's room in his kutia one day, and she said hanging on his bed was a mala. And she said to him, Baba, what's that? And he said, it's a mala. And she said, well, what have you got that for? And he said, I do jap. But even Baba does japa. And she said to me, can you imagine? Baba does jap. It's like Einstein doing the 2 times table. Oh. I'd like to share with you something that happened to me recently. Some years ago, my marriage with Buri ended, and after a long and mainly happy marriage. And where we lived was land where Muniraj came and blessed this land. He came in the early 90s. And he said to build a temple, and I already had a murti of Lord Shiva, and so I built this temple and got Indian temple doors from India, and Muniraj called the temple Sri Mahadevadam. So I would do the Havan there and puja every day and so on. And when the marriage ended in the separation, Buri got that property. So she now does it. And I was really heartbroken to leave this murti I'd served for 30 years. And so I thought, well, I have to have another murti of Lord Shiva. And so I'm looking on the internet, the Indian shops on the internet, and no, I don't like any of these murtis at all. And a few weeks ago, just around Christmas time, I was looking and I saw this murti for sale in India of Lord Shiva, and it just grabbed me. This is in the last 2 months. So I immediately sent them money, PayPal'd the money, and I can tell you from India to Australia, the mail sometimes takes weeks and weeks and weeks. It came in 10 days. And the woman who delivered it from FedEx was a young, very beautiful woman, like an angel. And she walked around to where my door is at the back here, and with this big smile on her face and this box. And it was just, I don't know, a beautiful moment for some reason. Maybe it's because she was a nice looking girl, I don't know. But it was, she had this lovely energy, and she said, I think this is for you. So I opened it up, there's a polystyrene box, and lying inside the polystyrene box, looking up at me, was Lord Shiva, this murti. And it was if he leapt into my arms, and I cannot fully describe the experience. It was like a shower of golden joy enveloped me. and it was completely spontaneous. And this has happened in the last month, happened in early January this year. So now I really prayed that I could serve again a Murti, and Bing it came. And it's the most beautiful, beautiful experience to wake up every morning and there's Baba, there's Lord Shiva. I've always associated Baba with Lord Shiva. The first time I went to India in '75, I walked in cowboy boots to Amarnath, 16,000 feet up in the Himalayas, and made my pranam on the August full moon, which is when you make the yatra. I was there within 5 days of arriving in India. And I felt ever since that moment that Lord Shiva's sitting there and I'm not separate. Whatever, Ki Jai.
Thank you. Nan.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I think the point is that it just never stops. It never stops happening.
Yeah.
And as Hiraman said, you know, we're all equal in this. We're all the same. There's no difference between the few that we had the blessing of seeing Baba in a physical body and somebody who walked in yesterday. There's all the same, all equal, all loved. In his eyes, no difference, and there should be no difference in our eyes either.
Some of us, it just took a lot longer to work on.
Yeah, bit slow, eh?
Yeah.
I think it runs in the family.
Would somebody else like to ask a question or say something?
So as incredible as it may sound, I am from Allahabad. As Hiraman, you were describing that you went to Allahabad and Varanasi in '76, and I was at that time 7 years old. My parents' house in Allahabad is not very far from the Kumbh Mela place, but it's still. I don't think even my dad or myself or anyone in my family ever met Babaji in India. And when we came to US, we came to know about Crestone Ashram and Ramlotiji. And then after coming to US, then I feel connected to Babaji. And we have been going to the temple for many years now, maybe 15-ish or so years. So that's how I was relating when you were telling your story about. Yeah, he is with everyone.
Yeah.
It's a matter of feeling about it.
Yeah. I'll just tell you that after the Mela was open or over, there's 20 million people there that want to leave. And so you can imagine what Allahabad was like. And so Babaji had told us to come back to Hirakan, but we'd left all of our climbing gear in Varanasi. And so everybody that was going back to Hirakan, there were buses, and Babaji was in a car. And so he said, and I, of course, was just willing to leave everything, which made Karen go crazy. But Babaji was just, like, no, that's silly. Why don't you just go get it and come to Hirakan? So we went. The last time I saw Baba at the Mela, he just touched me on the chest and said, "You come to Hirakan." And then all of a sudden I started hearing, I didn't know exactly when it happened. I started noticing that everybody's voices, I could hear their voice, but it all came out as Om Namah Shivaya. So there was just this background Om Namah Shivaya music everywhere. And then everything just like was in place just completely. And so we went to the train station and you couldn't even get within 50 yards of a train. It was just like packed with people. And the bus stations were the same. And so there was just no way to leave kind of. And, but I was just, this whole Om Namah Shivaya was just filling my entire being. And so Kusmus and Karen were kind of a little bit worried, like, how are we ever going to get out of here? And so we were walking down the street and we met this one person and had a brief conversation with them, that just felt completely right. And like, I just knew that the reason we were there was for that. And then I said, now we can go. And they both looked at me like, yeah, where are we going to go? And then just within a few seconds, this man came up and pranamed and gestured for me to follow him. And I followed him down an alley and a couple crisscrosses, and there's a bus sitting there that's with the motor running, the door open, and it's totally full except for there's one seat in the front that holds 3 people. And the people are just packed in the aisles and everything. And he just gestures to come. And I said, and so I just gestured, wait, and I get my friends. And so I went back and got him and said, we have a bus. And we got on the bus and we walked in the door and they started up and just took off. And by this time, they're starting to notice that I was in a little bit of an altered state. And so after we're driving for a few miles, then Kusmus said, well, you did ask him where we were going, didn't you? And I said, no, actually, I didn't think about that. And so that's how we left Allahabad. And it was actually going to, I mean, that's how we left Allahabad, and it was going to Varanasi. So that was, just when we're just kind of leave ourselves open, then, the journey can be interesting, but we'll get where we're supposed to be.
I have a little story about Varanasi too. So in 1975, I was in India. I'd been in Amarnath, and then I thought, where should I go next? I'll go to Varanasi and bathe in the Ganga. So I didn't know anything. So I took a train to Varanasi, and I got out of the train in Varanasi, and I didn't have much money, but so I said to a rickshaw driver, take me to a hotel. So he took me to this hotel and they showed me a room, and it was so dirty, I wouldn't put the dog in there. So I'm kind of arguing with the guys in the reception area of the hotel and telling them the room was disgusting. And suddenly this door opens. There's a bedroom that opens right off the lobby. And it was a really old friend of mine that I used to live with in England. This is in the middle of India in a random hotel. And he said, yeah, there are buggers here. Come in, slam the door. He said, what are you doing? I said, well, I came to bathe in the Ganga. And he said, well, I just rented a house on the river for 6 rupees a day. So you want to come and live with me there? This is like Baba takes, this miracle takes care. So we would sit every morning and, well, in those days, smoke some ganja for 5 o'clock in the morning and watch the bodies float down the river and swim in the Ganga. But it's like the miracle. Everything gets somehow taken care of when you're on a yatra like that.
What was it like for you to, when you sat with Babaji, either one of you? Because in these satsangs, it's making me remember more about the times I was with Babaji. And actually, I just did one with Makundi in French. And there was a translator. And people were asking about that. And I just realized that in 1981, I was so full of myself. I don't know how much I think Baba had to work really hard to, crack me open enough so I could feel his amazing unconditional love and even realize all the miracles that were going on. So, like I said, sometimes I see pictures of Devi and she's more in meditation. I can understand that more because my mind was just going wild with, oh, who's they? What do they think of me? Will Baba give me this treat? Am I the most important just all about me and my ego. And so I don't know if either of you had something to share about that, how maybe you were more perceptive or holier. I wasn't very holy.
I didn't know anything. But I was, I just knew I had to work. So then we were shifting rocks and stuff like that, building gardens and all the time. And I remember one day that it was the monsoon, and so everybody's hiding in their room, and I'm not very good at sitting around doing nothing. So I went looking for something to do, and then there were a lot of logs at the bottom of the steps down at the river, and I knew they needed to come up for the kitchen. So I just started getting a log on the shoulder and carrying it up to the kitchen, back and forth, no big deal, just working quietly. And I came after one journey down, I got to the top of the steps with this big log on my shoulder, and Baba was standing there waiting for me, big smile on his face. And he said, "Namai, you're a good soldier." And I was like, okay, yeah, thanks, Baba, and carried on. And then afterwards, what the hell's that about, good soldier? And I realized what he was saying was such an important lesson. It was, don't wait to be told. See what needs doing and get on with it. Just see what needs doing. So yeah, I don't know whether that answers your question, Moti. Yeah. The one other experience, though, I used to sleep in a room that was kind of under Baba's kutia, and this is when I first arrived. And after a couple of nights, I would wake up in agony in the middle of the night. And it was like my spine was on fire. It was like somebody had shoved a red hot poker up my spine. And I was crying in pain, and I didn't know what to do. So I would go and stand against the wall underneath, on the cliff underneath Baba's window, and just put my arms out and stand there and cry, because that was as close as I could get to him. And I had no idea what was going on. And it went on for some nights, and then it went away. And years later, I realized that this was some sort of Kundalini experience that he was bestowing. Yeah.
So, Damloti, there is looks like Biggie is asking a question on chat. I just now noticed. Okay, there's some audio issue. So if you want to read the question on the chat.
Let me see if I can do that. It's a long
So
one.
at the bottom of the screen, there would be a chat.
Hello, my name is Biggie.
He says, I would like to have your idea on Babaji's coming back into body. He once said to Gurudevi he would come to the west next time in a body instead of the east. What is your idea? Oh, Hiraman.
You give me the easy ones. My idea is that that when we're ready, I think Baba's in a body already, but when we are doing enough for him to come to us, it could be down the street or on the other side of the world. It doesn't really matter. And that'll be his choice. I've also had the feeling that he'll come to the West, but I think it's about us. You know, Babaji has many lineages. We spent time with him in Hirakan, and at the same time, other beings were spending time with him in other ways, you know. So we have to kind of deserve it. You know, we have to do our yoga, karma yoga, and be kinder, better people, and be helpful in the world, and you know, we can make this place a paradise. And part of that paradise would be Babaji being here sharing with us. But it's up to us. It's up to us every day. You know, people talk so much about the Kranti and the times and stuff, but in a way, the Kranti is happening inside of us every moment. You know, are we making the choice that is better for the world each moment? And of course, we don't always, because we're humans, but we fall down, we get up, and we try to do better the next time. And we keep doing that over and over. And eventually, some of the times we do better. And then maybe we do better even the next time. And so we make ourselves ready, and Babaji will be here. That's how I feel about it. Especially if we make beautiful Nandavan gardens ready, you know. Baba likes gardens.
Raghuvir is going to do in the days leading up to February the 14th, which is the anniversary of Baba leaving his body 37 years ago, 1,000 rounds of Om Namah Shivaya. So 108,000 times. And he's invited everybody around the world to do it in the spirit of calling Baba to please come from the Himalayas. So it's something we can do. And then if we're all doing it over those 3 days leading up to the February 14th, if enough people are calling him and saying, Baba, please come, then maybe. But I think, as Hiraman says, it's up to us. You know, in the present situation in the world, Baba said this would come. And he said, go to your own countries and make yourselves strong in your devotion there, because the time's coming. You won't be able to come to India, and the planes will stop overnight. And when the plane stopped earlier last year, I went, oh, okay, this is what Baba said was coming.
I think that earlier question about times that you are meditating with Baba, your question, Ramlati, for me, it was always about the thing is you need a lot of time with Babaji. You know, it's the quality of the time, you know, is just transcendental effervescence. You know, I in Hirakan, I never went to morning arti. I just got up and went to work, and then I would work all day, and Babaji would check in sometimes on what I was doing, and then in the afternoon, he would come when it was time to bathe. He would come and get me, and we'd go bathe together. And so I didn't spend hours and hours just sitting at Babaji's feet. That was never what I did in Hirakan. And at the same time, then I waited for him. In the evening arti, I didn't come in until I came in with Babaji. And we'd sit on the terrace while the arti was going on and just talk. So there were just those moments of utter stillness and transcendental beauty that you don't need much of that. You know, one of those moments in your life is, then you're a really lucky human being. And we can all have those moments, whether Babaji's in a body or not. We can have those moments when we find that stillness within ourselves to really be present and really be with Babaji, because he's always there. You know, there's no, my experiences with Babaji now, you know, after all these 37 years, I guess, that he's been gone are no different. They're the same. I have the same experiences. And I have the same experiences whether in Hirakan or away from Hirakan. And we can, you know, my experiences aren't important to you. Your experiences are important. Your stories, your devotion is, because Babaji had to take a lot longer to make me come to my senses, doesn't make me any more sensible. You all have the capabilities to do whatever you want to in life and be whoever you want to be. And that's what our duty is to be the best that we can possibly be, and to bring light to the world and kindness and joy, and to share it.
And especially now, you know, we're living in a world where countless millions of people are deeply traumatized and full of fear.
Mm-hmm.
And a great sadhana at the moment is every day when we walk out in the world, you know, express kindness to people, talk to people, ask them what's going on. Everybody you meet, everywhere you go. Yesterday I was at a coffee stand, and you know, a little pop-up coffee shop, and I'd forgotten to take my chandan off from the morning puja, and the woman asked me what it was, and I started to talk to her about well, I do this worship every morning, and this is part of it, and it's from India, and then it just led to a whole conversation about love. And you know, when I go in the local supermarket, I can tell you half the life story of most of the people who work in the supermarket, because I stop and ask them, you know, how are you? What's going on? So I know about the woman who can't stop smoking, and the one whose husband had a stroke, and the woman who just got divorced. It's, you know, these are acts of love. It's just everywhere, every day, we can bring love into the world. And I think this is Baba doing Baba's work as much as anything.
Seems like there's one more chat. I'm in a female form representing Shakti, saying this also. Oh, she just read this morning. Come from the Himalayas, Bole Baba, Ow, Bole Baba, Ow, or Bole Ma, Ow, Bole Ma, Ow.
That's just, I think Shastraji, Babaji gave that to Shastraji to say, this is the way to call me back. And ow means just come. It's the imperative form of come. So just with your heart, let her rip.
So we're just about at the end of the time we had talked about being together. See if I can find us back to a gallery view. Not very good at this.
One of the beauties, I really hope this satsang has touched everybody's heart this morning. And I think for Hiraman and I to come and tell these stories, one of the things that's really beautiful is it brings it alive again and again for us. I've sat here this morning listening with my tears in my eyes, and just to share these unspeakable beauties with you. And there's so much of experience over the years that is beyond words, that can't be spoken. But we do our humble best to share things that touch the heart.
Thank you.
And Hiraman, I have to say, to see you, brother, after all this time is so beautiful. I tell you a little story. When I left the Hawaii ashram, Muniraj sent me there to help prepare for his arrival. And when I left, Hiraman and Haranya gave me the blanket that Muniraj had been on Muniraj's bed. And so this is now 35 years ago, and this blanket is still in the family. And when our children were small, they were always wrapped up in this blanket until they were better again. We never forgot you, not at all.
Never forgot you either. Great to see you.
That's really
It is
that we began this satsang whenever devotees would gather here from America, around the world, and we'd gather and sit right here in this temple. And in those days, I had an old video camera. I tried to video them, but exactly what you're saying, you know, one story just ignited the other, and we just were all in tears practically. And I want to let you know that the idea is to do it at least once a week. And next week, Pujari from Russia and his wife Anjani will be sharing. It'll be 2 hours earlier, but it'll always be on this link, and I'll try to keep it straight. The following week will be many hours later, because it'll be Karku and Jamuna. So various devotees around the world. So the time will be shifting, but the link will be the same. Because like you, Nan Singh, I can't sleep the night before. I'm so excited to hear it all. Or thinking about who could we invite next. There's not weeks in the year.
Yeah, I was awake at 3:30 this morning. That one more story about, if there's time, about Babaji in normal life. When I first went with Buri to Herakan, you know, we hadn't been together very long, so we were pretty hot for each other. And but because we weren't married, and it's that Indian traditional way, they put us in separate rooms. She had to sleep in the women's place, and I had to sleep in the men's place. So it's hot. It was the summer in India, and one afternoon after lunch, we took a blanket and went out in the forest for some hanky-panky. And it was very beautiful to be with your lover lying on a blanket on a bed of leaves in the forest. So then we're coming back to the ashram, and we're kind of feeling a bit guilty. You know, like, oh, maybe we went out and misbehaved, not leading the holy life. And in a hot Indian afternoon, everybody sleeps, and Baba retreats to his room. Not this day. The ashram is silent. There's no one around. And as we walked up to the ashram hand in hand, there's Baba waiting for us, leaning on the gate. And we're like, oh shit. And as we walked up to him, he just beamed with love. He just showered with love in this smile, and he blessed us. And there were so many lessons, like in so many little, seemingly little actions that, or interactions that happened with him. But it was like, you know, you went and enjoyed each other. This is beauty. This is what you do. This is life. You know, like, of course you have my blessing. So, yeah, you know, to have this blessing of a human body, Baba said it can take 80,000 incarnations to get a human body. Don't waste it. And certainly I believe that that's not only our devotional life and our spiritual life, but to enjoy the human experience, the beauty of being in this incredible place.
Do you want to say anything in closing? I think somebody asked about also what it was like to sit with Babaji at the Havan, but maybe we'll have to, whatever you like.
I sat every day with him at the Havan, so that was I think my favorite time of the day, just that. And I used to also sit on Babaji's roof at night when everybody went to sleep and meditate. And he would come out some nights and we'd just sit and talk under the stars. It's pretty cool. But the Havan is just that's another one of those places of utter stillness, and just, you felt like when Baba did that, the yagnas are really powerful and beautiful, but the morning Havan, just with Babaji by yourself or a couple people, they're just that you felt like you were being, like the smoke was spread around the entire world, like when we do a Havan, it purifies the area that we're in. But Baba's Havans were like purifying the universe, and you just felt like completely complete access to the stillness that is the fundamental principle of life.
In 1977, in August, we did the Partik Puja, and at the end, Baba did a Havan at his kutia, Duni. And he said on that day, he was lighting the fires of destruction. And I was sitting sideways to him, so I'm looking at him in profile, sitting next to him, but looking at him in profile. And as he put the ghee in the fire, the flames were going 10 feet in the air. It was huge. And he was laughing like this belly laugh all the time. And I went, this is Lord Shiva. When he says he's lighting the fire of destruction, this is Lord Shiva, really burning all up the impurities.
Ole Baba ki jai.
DJ, thank you all. Thank you, Nan Singh and Hiraman, and hopefully we'll all meet again next week. We'll put this on YouTube, so there'll be a recording for anybody that missed it. Thank you.
Thanks everybody for sharing this with us.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bole Baba ki
Jai.
jai.
Hey.